impacted this election, talk about some of the things that the current events during this election when it pertains to certain events like voter fraud, which some people are claiming when it comes to Biden already being the declared winner by some. All those different things and more will be discussed during this 2020 presidential election results live stream. But before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications to be up to date with our latest content. So let's get started. At this point in time, the election currently stands at almost a standstill in a way. We are not getting as many votes as we got in the last couple of days. Um, Again, that is somewhat explicable as again we're reaching that point in time where we're just counting the ballots that are just left over. However, you're seeing certain candidates, in this case Joe Biden, coming up last minute, getting really close to the presidency. And I think it's pretty safe to say that within the next couple of hours, a winner to these elections might be declared. So currently looking at states that are still votes outstanding, taking a look at Pennsylvania, this race has stayed almost at a standstill for the last couple of hours. President Trump led here this morning. This state flipped during the day. So Biden now leads by a margin of 0.3% or around 20,000 votes. So right now that lead doesn't look too encouraging for President Trump as we see just a very hard pathway there for the president, as a lot of the votes that are still outstanding fall from a certain area. That is the Philadelphia area. And guys, if you guys have any comments, questions, concerns, you want to give an opinion out about things going on this election, please feel free to use the chat. It's there for a reason. And I mean, throughout this live stream, I'm going to be interacting with the chat. I mean, for the big majority part, as we move on later on in the live stream. So that is currently what we're seeing from Pennsylvania. Looks a little tough for the president. And again, this is a state the president must win to win this election. And frankly, at this point in time, not looking too promising in certain ways to get more votes. There's still a possibility, and if anything is to say, a lot of Republicans are claiming the quote-unquote voter fraud during this election, which again could be something that actually happened. And if it actually did, places like Pennsylvania might be a lot closer than we actually think. So let's keep that in mind. And like if you see right now, most counties have 95% reporting, and like the biggest of them all, Philadelphia County, has, I mean, pretty big amounts of votes reporting. And I mean, Biden is taking a bigger lead in Pittsburgh. And generally speaking, the Republicans don't have much left over. Only smaller counties are left with only like 95% of but still needed to be reported. So that is what we're currently seeing from the state of Wisconsin. And we're going to start to see a certain amount of activity in the state, more votes being counted, and even a winner being declared just within the next couple of hours. And more likely than not, we're probably going to see a recount when it comes to the state of Wisconsin, because just truly, it is looking like it's going to be a somewhat closer election than those in the past. So that is the first state that we have, and that is the state of Pennsylvania. Um, and as of right now, it's not looking too great for President Trump. For those President Trump supporters out there, I mean, it's a tough map right now. Going on to see the other states, I don't know why they haven't called North Carolina. I mean, it's decently close, but yeah, most votes reporting. However, it's 1.5% margin, so I think they should be able to call this race within the next couple of minutes or hours. Generally speaking, CNN has been very, very careful on how they call the races and when they do. Now, with North Carolina currently, I mean, it looks hard for Biden to overturn there. However, it doesn't really matter. Biden does not need North Carolina to win. He absolutely does not. He realistically only needs to win Pennsylvania, Nevada, Arizona. He needs to win in those places to have, I mean, a semi-decent or actually a pretty much guaranteed victory at this point. Now, for Trump, this is a must win, and right now he's winning it, and it does not look like Biden's going to end up overturning the victory. Let's actually just turn the map to the who's leading map, because I think that's a better perspective. As you guys can see, the swing states filled in for who they're voting. Now, going to Georgia, the vote has been pretty much mostly counted in the state of Georgia. However, currently in the state of Georgia, we're seeing a race that's come down to the last couple of votes. And truly, there's only a 4,000 vote difference. That is a pretty small margin. Keep in mind, I mean, a small county in Georgia, less than 3,000 ballots are cast. Like, for example, Clinch County. You have a total of what, 3,000 ballots cast in total, and that little small tiny county in Texas might have made or broken a victory for Biden, or in this case Trump. Or take a look, for example, at this county. It's extremely close. Now, the whole total of this county is about the total that is between former Vice President Biden and President Trump at this point in time, showing us that Georgia is a close race. This race is going to a recount. Whether, like, I mean, at this point, that's what it is. Biden has increased his lead by much, perhaps not, but an increase in lead is still an increase in lead, and at the end of the day, it's always good. So, I mean, at this point in time, that is what we're seeing with the state of Georgia. Now, there's another question that comes into a lot of people's head. Could things like voter fraud come into this election, and what are going to be the impacts? Take a look at a state like Georgia that's going to be the closest state during this election, most likely. It is a state that is extremely close, and I mean, really, a little county could change everything. Now, if voter fraud was a real thing, I mean, let's suppose, what would be the impacts? And I think right now, I mean, voter fraud could completely change the election in Texas, or not in Texas, in Georgia. So that is something that we're seeing right now. It's something that we definitely must analyze. Now, taking a look at other parts of the electoral map, like Arizona, CNN has not called this race. This race has narrowed down a little bit. It's now less than 1%. 94% reporting. However, most of the votes that we're seeing from the state, what we can tell is those votes are pretty much mostly reporting for the president at this point in time. Most notably in Maricopa County. In Maricopa County, we're seeing the president start to build a little bit of a lead in some ways. Or not a lead, but he's starting to get closer to a lead. So that is the first thing we must analyze. Maricopa County is looking a little bit better for the president. And just to be frank, that is something that is good for President Trump, as it gives him a bigger chance in the state of Arizona. I mean, taking a look at the vote totals at this time, we have about a 40,000 vote difference. It's a 1% difference. Truly, is the impact going to be humongous on this election? Probably not. But I mean, at this point in time, Arizona could really give the race to Biden, or make Trump a bigger pathway to the victory. Right now, the thing for Trump is that he simply has too many different things he needs to do. He doesn't only have to win in Arizona. He also has to win in Nevada, or Nevada not necessarily, but he has to win in Pennsylvania. He has to win in North Carolina. He has to win in Georgia. He has to win in all these places, which again may not be the easiest thing at this point in time for President Trump. Now, the last state is the state of Nevada, and at this point, it's Biden's just increasing his lead every single hour. Every time they give us a new batch of poll closings and poll counts, we easily can tell that, I mean, Biden is gaining votes. He's gaining support in these areas. And just to be frank, I mean, this state, a couple of minutes, and not minutes, but hours ago, we saw a pretty good chance for President Trump here in the state of Nevada. However, that really hasn't held. That really hasn't materialized for the president. We have to understand something. He needs at this point Nevada, because he's behind all other places. So, you know, it's looking like it might be a little harder for President Trump. So, hi, basketball highlights. I hope you're doing very, very well today. Let's see. I don't have anything from the chat yet. I mean, where's everyone in the chat? I was expecting a lot more people in the chat. But meanwhile, I just want to talk about some current things in this election. First thing I want to talk about is, why did Trump overperform in places like Ohio, where he's leading with 92% of the vote in by 8%? Why did Trump overperform in Iowa, where he's leading by, at this point, almost 9%? Yet, when it comes to states like Georgia, that a mere couple of years ago, they were no different than Iowa and Ohio. But at this point, Georgia is like further to the left than Ohio and Iowa. It's further to the left than Texas. That has always been. It's further to the left than North Carolina and Florida. That just sounds pretty crazy. I mean, you would have thought of this a couple of years ago. It would have been completely different. Let's see. Some more. Yeah, the stream seems to have less viewers. I don't know. I just like doing these updates, and then whoever just comes, I like having a chat with everyone. So that's always interesting. So Deli asked, what's up with the provisional ballots in Pennsylvania? So if I'm correct, from what I was reading earlier on, they're essentially segregating the ballots in Pennsylvania. So from provisional to like the regular ballots, and provisional ballots are going to be counted later on. That's the last I heard from that. Al Sherm asked, do you think Texas will go blue next election cycle? You know, when it comes to 2022 in the midterms, there is just a governor's race there. I'm not sure if that's going to end up materializing in a way for the Democrats. 2024, it's a completely different story. However, I think looking at the possibilities of like a post-Biden presidency in the United States, like the events that happened there, if the Democrats like go a little bit too far to the left, 2022, which right now it was looking like if the Republicans won was going to be a very big wave for the Democrats, and that wouldn't be no more. And in 2024, we would more likely than not see a Republican president. However, I mean, if those situations kind of stick, it depends. Texas, here's the thing. You have to flip a lot of voters. You have to convince a lot of them. And at this point in time, the mainstream Democratic Party have moved from a Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke is a perfect candidate for Texas, for example. He's charismatic. He's not too far to the left, but still appeals to both. He's moderate. He appeals to the left, and he also appeals to the right-leaning Texans. So, I think at this point in time, Texas right now, probably not going to go blue, at least until 2024, if not even more. So that's what I think right now. Texas and California are locks for both sides. Well, I mean, basketball highlights, it's truly not. It is to a certain point, but Texas is no longer the same status it had as a Republican stronghold as it did years ago. I mean, think about it like this. A state like Texas, I mean, traditionally, when you think of a Republican state, the first thing that comes to mind is Texas. Is voting to the left of Ohio. Texas to the left of Ohio. I mean, a couple of years ago, this would have sounded like insane. So, you know what I mean? It's not the same thing. So Neptune asked, do I think the Democrats will replace Nancy Pelosi as House Speaker? Right now, I'm not sure that they will do that because first and foremost, Nancy Pelosi's establishment in the House. She's going to have them vote to win the speakership. And frankly, at this point in time, the Democrats, they can't be playing too many games with, I want the majority, you want you want the House speakership. Because if they run, they're going to have to run someone. And I think Nancy Pelosi is the establishment, and she's going to win. Now, you're obviously going to have those Republican or Democratic members like your AOCs and her squad, quote unquote, like Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. Those congressmen probably would want someone new in the chair of the speakership. Now, how confident am I of that happening? Not that much. I think Nancy Pelosi stays as Speaker of the House. It's plain and plain and simple. If Beto would have run against Cornyn, Biden would have been closer to victory. Yes, I think that is true. And I think that seat could have been more in play because here's the thing. In Texas, looking at the Senate race, the candidate they ran, Mary Jane Hager, she's not as strong of a candidate. So I think generally speaking, they could have definitely ran a lot better of a candidate. So we have to think of that in that way. Now, when it comes to this presidential race, I want to see what you guys think. I know that some people in the chat were really active on the last chat, and now that it's like a little bit less fluid, there's less people. I want to see what like you guys think of the fraud and what the Republicans claim is voter frauds. I know basketball highlights wasn't here during the last live stream, so maybe we could hear your opinion. But generally speaking, what do you guys think about these voter fraud allegations being made by the Republicans? Because the thing at this point in time, those allegations are serious, right? I mean, infringing on the American democracy. So, I mean, realistically speaking, how big is that? How big could that scheme be? That's the question. What was Biden's best move during the election that let him here? I think at this point in time, it was not speaking too much, shutting his mouth for a big part of the campaign season. At this point in time, I just think that Biden rode a wave. I mean, Biden, ever since the pandemic started, even more after the Black Lives Matter movement, was riding on a big wave of momentum. Now, that wave of momentum at the end started to slow down. If the election was within like maybe a couple more days after the actual election date, easily I think Biden could have fell completely, and he could have lost states like Pennsylvania, and he could have been losing in Georgia, into Arizona. So, I think Biden just rode a very, very nice wave here. Did nothing really like spectacular on the way here. And I think he's just the result of a president that has been divisive for many Americans. There's people that really, really like him, are very enthusiastic about him. But then you also have those that hate his guts, do not want anything to do with the president. And that division in America is not caused by the president himself. It's caused by those people who just tend to disagree or agree with his ideologies, his points of view, and things like that. So I think like during Biden's campaign, I mean, that was the best thing to do, just hide. Essentially, I mean, that was a smart move. Soapmore says there has been been fraud, and Trump has every right to pursue his case. Whether he's right or wrong, it's not illegal to be wrong. That's right. And I think here's the thing. I've been saying this thing. The Republicans are entitled to make their claim, and if they're going to sue and spend a crap ton of money on this, because remember, they have to the cost of legal fees and stuff like that. I know they have their lawyers some of them are doing it for like volunteer work. However, it truly is something that the Republicans currently like have to think about. They wouldn't be pursuing this election if it wasn't for a reason. And you can't just walk into court with a crazy reason expecting to get the election handed to you. You have to have a very, 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 very good reason for the election to be kind of disqualified or something. And especially with voter fraud. The Republicans have pointed to certain things here on Twitter for the most part, like showing a couple things, like people who were dead and they voted, or people, certain things like that. So, I mean, at this point in time, that is something that we're looking at. So, is the evidence there? It's debatable. And now it also depends on how you look at it. So, I mean, you're seeing, for example, independent politics thinks he still wants he wants more proof. Ostrom, I'm going to have to agree with you. I know that a lot of Trump supporters are being a little bit of sore losers. And, I find it very ironic because back in 2016, when Hillary Clinton supporters were kind of the same thing. Because here's the thing. We have to understand something. You lose an election, the chances are you're going to be a sore loser. You're going to say, we lost, blah, 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 and you're going to go completely inside. So, that is something that we have to understand. And to put it frankly with you, I think that they're being a little bit of sore losers. So, I think that's something you have to think about. Some say Trump's rallies can competitive in places like the Midwest versus Biden did not hold as many. That's true. And I think, for example, that is a major reason why Trump overperformed in Florida. So when we're thinking of Donald Trump's campaign structure, what was the thing that really helped him out? Really, it was those rallies. Look at the excitement for the president in those areas. In Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin. Thousands among thousands of people. Biden at his biggest rallies, he had probably had 500 cars at most because he only did drive-in rallies, if not rallies with 20 people, which, I mean, that's just more of a get-together than like a rally. But with Biden, that excitement wasn't there. If Biden would have had a movement, if he could have campaigned like Barack Obama, I think Biden could have won this election by a landslide. And I mean, this just tells us that Donald Trump, one, is a good campaigner. Biden is not such a strong one. So I think that's something to keep in mind. And I'm gonna tell you this. So on Sunday, um, I heard the president was coming to Miami. So I was like, oh, I want to see how that looks like. I want to see if it's like like in perspective, is it as many people as, like, for example, they claim it is? Does it look like as that many people? So I decided to drive around where the rally was being held, and we went through the parking lot. We saw everything, and I'm gonna be honest with you. From what I saw, there was thousands of people there, and I mean, that just shows excitement for the president. And this is here in Florida, so yeah, that is something that we have to keep in mind. So yeah, I think Ohio and Iowa have moved battleground to Republican. They have moved to Republican states. I mean, over the last couple of elections, that has become more and more clear every single day. And I mean, or every single election cycle. I mean, when the Democrats think they have something big coming there, um, they simply don't. So yeah. Um, independent politics. So if you want today, I have a Discord set up. I don't use it that much because I'm not too familiar with it. However, I have the link and everything. So today, maybe after the live stream, I'm gonna go on the community tab and put that information there, and then we could have that Discord. And I think I made it when I was like still like a very small channel. So now that I have like a little bit more of following, I think it could be more active, and that could be something very fun. We could do there, and we could discuss about politics during that in that Discord. So yeah, I think definitely that's a possibility. You know, I'm gonna tell you something right now, guys. I think that the president's ability to overperform, the president's ability to, like, I mean, win Ohio by 8 points, win North Carolina by 1.5, Florida by 3.5, Texas plus 6. His ability to do that comes from that excitement he was able to create. I mean, just think about it. When you think about crazy voter enthusiasm stories during this election, you think of Trump supporters. I mean, think about it. When they chased down the bus in Texas, chasing down Kamala Harris, when they did these big rallies holding thousands of votes and things like that. These things truly come around. So Basketball Highlights was asking what were my thoughts on Madison Cawthorn, the youngest ever elected House of Representatives. So I think he wasn't like his political story is inspiring in a way, not because of like of what he believes in, but like his story is just very very interesting. He is essentially crippled, and and how it has like a little he has a disability due to like an injury, and I think that story along with like I saw this moment during the RNC. Both the DNC and the RNC had their good moments, and I think one of the most heart melting, you could say, moments that seemed like of sorts of like a very good political moment that was not really political, it was like a good humane moment, was when Cawthorn stand up for the national flag. Both parties have moments like that. I think during the RNC that was probably like one of the moments. I classified Trump supporters driving a Biden bus of the road as voter enthusiasm. Well, I did not say it was good. I just said that when you think of the crazy examples of voter enthusiasm, you think of Trump supporters. I mean, like of course, never do that. And I mean, in any scenario, don't drive anyone off the road. That's just weird and insane. But let's put it in perspective. Like, to be honest with you, I mean, that just shows like a very extreme voter enthusiasm. I think you might have understood me wrong what I said there, but tell me if that's clarified in the chat. I don't know why I just said classified. Now, I want to actually do some math here with Pennsylvania. I want to see what's going on there. Yeah, I think at this point it's looking better for Biden. 20,000 vote lead. I mean, at this point, 96% reporting. It's looking pretty good. You misheard me. Okay, we're good. I think that Pennsylvania at this point looks strong for Biden. unfortunately for President Trump supporters out there, it's not looking too strong. And, at this point in time, there is like very little things to blame. And I think just one thing we must definitely like come to the conclusion of is that these states, Pennsylvania, for example, they went to President Trump by such a narrow margin that, I mean, even being close is remarkable in and of itself. Because, I mean, truly, to be honest, it's not that bad if you think about it. Because, I mean, if he was behind by so many votes, I mean, in 2016, the Democrats, like, it was still little votes. So coming back is not going to be that hard. So I think that's something that definitely really helped out Biden during this election. And in Pennsylvania, I think a lot of people were expecting that. I mean, coming to election, I think a lot of people, let's not kid ourselves, that President Trump was almost coming into an election that he was bound to lose. Did he have his chance? Yes. And I think a lot of the people gave him his chances and all of that. However, to be frank, it wasn't like his best case. He didn't come in super strong. What do you agree? What do you think? Would you agree? Think of Trump supporters? Okay, I think that you misspelled something there, but I'm gonna try to read it. Do I think of Trump supporters struck the count in Pennsylvania? I think it's just a little bit hypocritical in a way, because just be consistent. Now, generally speaking, I would say it's better, of course, to like count every ballot. But I mean, it also becomes a thing like of like if they really want certain things to happen. But it's a little bit hypocritical. But I mean, at the end of the day, things like that happen all the time. I mean, take a look at like in 2016, the same thing happened. Like that type of sentiment usually always happens. So we have to keep that in mind. So yeah, that was a typo. That's what I thought, because I was having a tough time reading that. I think at this point in time, we have the Trump base that is very excited and truly somewhat of a called silent majority. I talked a lot about the silent majority on the channel. I don't know if you guys have followed me. I know some of you have. I know Independent Politics has followed me for a long time. At least for a while. I know people like Soapmore have been here for a while. I've seen commenting and actively like participating in the channel in a lot of different ways since like a long time ago. You would know that I've done a lot of videos about silent majority, and I think we saw somewhat of a silent majority for Trump. It's rather more of a silent minority, but it's still a group of voters. Will the popular vote decide the winner in the future versus the Electoral College? One, no, because wouldn't you have to amend? Yeah, I just clarified that. I think that since like you guys are a little bit on the delay and you don't see everything, yeah. It's not a majority, it's a silent minority. That has to be, first of all, done through the Constitution. So, again, going to be tough. But generally speaking, I mean, the Democrats are going to push for it because for them, I mean, the Electoral College is like such a stretch when really they could just be appealing to a more like bigger states. Because like, here's the thing. The Electoral College is for many reasons, but I think one of the biggest reasons, the most symbolic reason is so smaller states don't get forgotten, because if not, everyone would just be campaigning in California, Texas, New York, and you would win the election. Like if you win in those states. So, I mean, at this point in time, that is the thing that we're seeing. And I think with the Electoral College, that's one of the beauties of the Electoral College. Thank you for all the good work you did. Oh, thank you, the Raven. I really appreciate it. During this election, I mean, I've done like a lot of videos. I was looking back on my channel. I did 250 videos, so it was a lot. But to be honest with you, at this point in time, with the voter fraud and everything like that, we are looking at a race that is going to be litigated. And look, I'm gonna tell you this right now. As we inch closer to those like deadlines, those court filings, we hit like towards that. I mean, it's going to become clearer who becomes president. It's going to become more clear if the president is going to really contest this. Because again, you have to think about this in a logical way. Like what sane person would just randomly walk into court, try to litigate an election? You know what I mean? There is no voter fraud yet. There is no evidence of voter fraud. However, there are certain things that could be showing that there could be voter fraud. I mean, both sides have arguments. Both sides could be right. And at the end of the day, it really does depend. And I'm going to tell you something right now. It's truly going to depend. It's only been one case, like independent politics is clearing up. However, you have to think about it crucially. How big of an impact is this going to have on the race? Is it truly going to have like that big of an impact? And I mean, even if there was voter fraud, let's suppose there was voter fraud. How big of the impact? I mean, what could it change? A couple thousand votes here and there in a close race that might have it. That might have an impact. On a larger scale race, where you're counting millions and millions of votes, and I mean the differences could be anywhere from like a couple thousand votes. The difference with voter fraud in those cases are not they're not too big. You know what I mean? So truly impact on the election. Trump is claiming fraud. The Republicans are claiming fraud. They're more than welcome to do that. I mean, it's in their right to sue. It's in their right to investigate. However, I mean, at the end of the day, it truly comes down to a couple of different things. And I mean, taking a look at the electoral map right now, where could the most voter fraud change? Probably in Georgia. The difference is so tight in Georgia right now, 4,000 votes, that truly, if voter fraud is going to change a race, it's probably going to be Georgia. So, but I mean, everywhere else, you would need to have an insane amount of voter fraud. Here, you need 30,000 votes in a state of around 12, like almost 1.5 million voters. In Arizona, you would need what? 40,000 votes. Pennsylvania, you would need 20,000 votes. I mean, voter fraud levels at those levels, I mean, it's not, you know what I mean? It's not that big. So we have to think about that way. So honestly, that's something we have to take a look at. So yeah, you just called it. No one won. Oh, that's funny. I mean, at this point, yeah, we're looking like the race hasn't been officially called yet. They're still counting votes, and they're not going to call this race until like they have every single last ballot in. However, at this point in time, it looks more and more likely each and every hour that it ends up being the race for Biden. This is Biden's election to win at this point in time. If we think about it, the pathways for a Trump presidency, or rather a Trump re-election at this point, they're not too likely. I mean, take a look at some of the things that have gone on. Like, there is those possibilities. There is still the chance. However, there is the possibilities, but that does not guarantee anything. And I mean, with this voter fraud, we're going to be sitting here for a long time. Well, it's not me. I mean, the Republicans have the right to investigate, but they have to have evidence. You're right. And I mean, they could walk into court because, again, they're walking into court with these lawyers. They're litigating the election. I don't think the Republicans, I mean, maybe the information is classified or something, but these people are not just going to walk into the court or something and just go like, oh, we have this huge claim and we have nothing about it. Like, they're going to have information. They're going to have those things. So I think at this point, that's why you're hearing. Oh, my friend UEP is here. Hi UEP. I hope you're doing very well tonight during this live stream, and I'm excited to have everyone here today. So just think about it in that way, and in critically thinking about it, you can't just walk into court and say, just claim voter fraud. You have to have evidence. Now, I said this during the last live stream. If there is voter fraud, what's going to need to happen? In the future, Biden's probably going to get elected, and whoever did it is going to get their time. And look, our friend Political Analysis Election Predictions is here. Hi, what's up? So yeah, you guys have to think about it in that way, like especially with the voter fraud. Like, it's something that just in general in a regular election happens a little. Of course, there are those concerns since you have the mail-in ballots and things like that, but maybe there's a possibility that there's more. However, let's think about it. Like, something at that level, something like that, it's not that likely. And I mean, it sounds bad and it's illegal and everything, but to pull off voter fraud at an extremity, like enough to have Trump win the election and like has taken so many votes away from Trump, you would have to be a complete genius because the system is not easy to cheat. Let's think about that. The system to cheat the U.S. system, especially when it comes to elections, it's ridiculously difficult. Now, I mean, and that's even at a small scale. Like, there's only 22 cases. There's 22 reported cases of voter fraud in the last election. So we just have to like think about it. Like, logically, does it make sense? Who knows? Oh, thank you, Political Analysis Election Predictions. I like your videos too. You know, I think at this point in time, like this race has really been very weird in many different aspects. Like I'm going to say something right now. This electoral map looks completely all over the weather. I mean, let me use a pun here. It's all over the map. Like this map, no one got close to ever predicting this map because it just looks so weird. You have states like Georgia voting to the left of like Florida, to the left of North Carolina, states that have traditionally been states. And I mean, you have Texas going by 6%, you have Ohio going by 8%. The map is all over the map. It's all over the place. And I think at this point in time, it's a race that it truly is all over the place. So I mean, this electoral map is very different from what a lot of people thought. And, I think we're looking at an electoral map that really gave Trump overperformance in places that he won in 2016 to certain except the rough flip. He overperformed in Ohio by 3 points. He overperformed in Iowa by around 3 points. He overperformed in Florida by 2 points, which is like a lot considering Florida standards. You know what I mean? Like I think Trump overperformed his possibilities during this election. Coming in, I mean, I think a lot of the morale amongst Trump supporters, the morale amongst the Republican Party, that general morale was more of a morale of races that they were like almost going into the race. We might lose. There was a high possibility. Now, what is one thing that I think really messed this election up? And I think we would have had a lot smoother of an election if it was decided on election night. And let's suppose that like it's not like what Trump is saying, like just count the ballots that were on election night, but rather if everything, like all the precincts reporting mailed in, whatever was reported on election night, we wouldn't be living through this mess right now of I'm gonna sue you, you're gonna sue me, we're gonna voter fraud, whatever. Because during that time frame, both campaigns, there was a point in time where the Biden campaign was like scared. They were, look at Florida, when that started to happen, that red mirage, which the red mirage there in a way, it wasn't it was there, but it wasn't as big as a lot of people thought. That really started to scare the Biden campaign at certain points of the election night. So, generally speaking, we're looking at a couple of races that truly for Biden, he could have done a lot better. He could have overperformed. But I think Donald Trump just had a lot of excitement. And if we think about it, what really gave Donald Trump this overperformance, it was most likely his excitement. When earlier during this live stream, I was talking about how voter enthusiasm is something that is insanely important. Just think about it. Donald Trump's voter enthusiasm was the highest, or some of the highest we've seen in a very long time. We must remember that. With President Trump, we saw rallies with over thousands and thousands of people, 30,000 people, even amidst a COVID-19 pandemic. And I was also talking about how President Trump came to Miami. I live in Miami, for those of you that don't know. I live in South Florida. And when Donald Trump was coming here, I was interested to see, is the masses of people the same that they're reporting? Is it exaggerated? So I decided to drive by the area where the rally was being held. That was packed. You would walk, not walk, but like drive around. You would see people walking like from very, very, very far distances. So I think at this point in time, we are seeing, the president had a lot of enthusiasm. And I saw it with my own eyes. I didn't believe at some points in time that that Trump could like pull off those crowds, but he did. And it was very, very filled. And it created like a lot of excitement about those voters. And those rallies is truly what gave Trump a victory in Florida. It's those rallies that's probably going to give Trump a victory in North Carolina. In Ohio, a little better. You know what I mean? It's those certain things that could have happened. If this wasn't any normal election, Biden would have already received the call. That was true. And I think just with two things to analyze here, that one, generally speaking, this election has been weird just because of the time frame. Like the time frame has been completely off. Like with the counting of the ballots, if this election was normal circumstances, he would have already conceded and everything. But it is that mail-in vote. And I think, generally speaking, I think that it was going to be hard anyways. Now, I think this election has definitely been completely out of the norm. I mean, what on election night, to be honest with you, it felt exactly the same. Other than the fact that we had Rhode Island not be called until like midnight. We haven't had Alaska been called. That's weird. But generally speaking, election night felt like a normal election night. The safe calls were made a couple of minutes later. Like Wyoming was called 20 minutes later, something like that. But just to be fair, I mean, this wasn't a normal election. But election night did feel normal. So that general competitiveness where we had so much uncertainty on election night, where, I mean, dang, it's been 3 days after the election and we still don't know who won. We have an idea of who could win, but we do not know for sure. So, I mean, that general feeling of difference, but yet similar, causing a lot of this like Trump campaign moving and litigating all these different things when it pertains to this presidential election. I think that is currently what we're looking at right now. And this election could have been a lot different. It truly could have been. And it just happens to be that it's how it turned out. If this race won, let's suppose the pandemic wasn't here, because without the pandemic, mail-in voting would have been an issue or wouldn't have been as big of a factor in this election. Or, for example, first of all, Trump would have done a lot better, because truly, if Trump loses tonight or by tomorrow, whenever they call the race, if he does lose, I think one of the major reasons we could say that he lost was the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's get that straight. So if it wasn't for that pandemic, I think President Trump could have been doing a lot better. Some people are starting to bring up in the chat that, well, there were some 14,000 ballots that were of dead people in Georgia that went to Biden. I mean, not to say that those allegations, those could be factors, but those are not concrete data. I mean, if we see like trends, not only in Georgia, but in all the states, we see something that's like very hard to disprove. I think that's when you start to believe voter fraud. Because here's the thing with voter fraud, sometimes it just ends up being very, how do I explain this? It just really ends up being something that becomes like contested and things like that. And then people are going to say, this isn't, this not, you know what I mean? That is something that we have to think about. So yeah, there was dead ballots being counted for the people that were asking. So, you know, I think at this point in time, we're gonna see Biden is probably gonna declare victory tonight. He has a speech, or I don't know if he already had his speech. Oh, I wasn't checking. I think he already had his speech, if I'm correct. But he's probably gonna declare victory tonight. And I mean, he already set up a transition website for God's sakes. I mean, he self-declared himself the winner. Of course. He doesn't say in a way like Trump, where he kind of like declared himself the winner, and then the media isn't behind him, because again, that's a whole different issue. But here's the thing with this election, I think a big reason why we have a lot of this divide is the media. I'm going to just say this right now. I mean, the media this election really helped out Biden. They didn't like bring out the Hunter Biden stuff, which I mean, as an independent and an independent thinker, I think it becomes important to think that that information should be put it in the face of the American people. This is what Hunter Biden did involving your candidate for president. So, you know, I think that there's something that we have to think about. And the media just ended up being very friendly to Biden and very against Trump. I mean, Donald Trump declared himself the winner. Biden also did the same thing. Again, it was like a lot less subtle. It was more subtle the way that Biden did it. However, I think that the media just really didn't like cover like a lot of Biden. They just were really criticizing Trump. But I mean, during this election, I mean, Biden just had a general advantage when it came to the media. And I think that's another thing that we saw. During this election, we saw something that we didn't see during the last. During the last election, Trump controlled the media like puppets. Like, let's think about it. During the last election, he was able to essentially move any narrative that he wanted. And I think like one of the reasons, like if we were to sit here and list the reasons why Trump won the election in 2016, I would say his way of manipulating the media was insane. The media caught on, and they got mad. So now they're going very against Trump. Keep that in mind. And, you know, I think that at this point, the president, he lost in part because of the media, because The media is who controls the information. And if the information does not get to the American people, whether it be pro-Trump or against Trump or pro-Biden or against Biden, the American people are not going to be informed. So that is something that we have to think about. Republicans, okay, here's another thing. I mean, it also depends. What do you consider voter fraud? Certain people consider voter intimidation. Certain people consider things like, for example, voter suppression, voter fraud. Now, would I disagree with that? I would say definitely those things aren't necessarily voter fraud as a whole. Are they bad for the electoral system? Are they bad for the country? Yes, but they're not voter fraud. However, some people claim it to be that way. And if you look at it in that lens, the Republicans in many key states like Georgia could have and have in the past turned away thousands of votes that probably would have lent to the Democrats. So keep that in mind. I mean, of course, I don't think that definitely that is like some sort of fraud, but still. Basketball Highlight says, I've literally showed you in Nevada, there's dead people casting. There is, I think that that's something to be in mind. And I don't know if you guys saw the graph. I want to see what you guys think of this. It was comparing voter registration numbers to actual results. I think that data could definitely be manipulated because it could be voter registration, including states, for example, that do same-day voter registrations. However, if the amount of votes are larger than the voter registration numbers, that just doesn't make sense. I think that's something that we have to think about. So, yeah, that's something that we have to think about. And I think what's another thing that we're seeing? We're seeing the Republicans, and if you're a Republican, please do not get offended. The Republicans are acting like sore losers. And same way the Democrats acted like sore losers in 2016. Keep that in mind. Because you lose an election, and you're probably going to, you're going to have to, it's going to be tough. So you know what I mean? For any election, both for Hillary Clinton, both for Donald Trump. I mean, you lose the election, it's going to be tough. And I mean, yeah, so I'm reading right now in the chat. So the best entertainment says, I like Joe Biden. No, I don't really care about the candidates. I mean, I equally like both candidates. So that's something that we have to keep in mind. Right now, like another thing that we have to take into account is that Biden overall, I mean, I think Biden did a pretty good campaign. I mean, Biden did not need to campaign, and I think it's better that he like stayed back a little bit. Now, when it comes to what this would look like as a presidency, who knows? But I think at this time, at point in time, who knows really what can happen. Now, when it comes to specifically, I mean, the effects on the streets. I'm going to tell you something right now. I think Kamala Harris was not the best running mate, perhaps. I think Kamala Harris was a little weaker as a running mate. I thought coming into like this last part of the election season, I thought Kamala Harris was going to be the fiery candidate that was going to get people moving. That was not the case. Kamala Harris just really like she could speak here and there, but it wasn't as like robust as I thought she was going to be. As I thought like she was going to like take control of the people and move. And I think at this point in time, again, taking a look at why in places like Florida, the Democrats are winning by so much. In Ohio and Iowa, it states that Biden was close to leading in the polls, if not leading. In part, it could be said it's because of Kamala Harris a little bit not being able to move those crowds. And there were some smarter choices for vice president. The Biden campaign didn't take those into account. However, I mean, they did not choose them. But I mean, there is really like nothing else that really could be like done. You know what I mean? Something else. Someone's mentioning right now in the chat. Kanye 2020. Surprisingly, in some states, Kanye West got some votes and like over like half a percentage point, which is interesting. That was completely a joke campaign. I mean, whoever took Kanye West's presidential run seriously, I mean, good for you. But you know what I mean? That was interesting. Congratulations, Donald Trump. No, I don't think that he's going to win a second term at this point in time. We have to think of the data as we have it right now. And this is no polling data. Polling data, that could be contested. I think with polling data, it's no longer reliable. But these are the actual results. The numbers just don't add up for the president. So who knows? Now, again, you guys can claim fraud. I mean, and there could be. Who knows? But those things are going to ultimately be decided by the courts. Those decisions are going to be made by the courts. And after investigations, after certain things like that happen, is when we're going to start to see the results of that. So again, you have to think about that. And I mean, generally speaking, that is a bigger factor. Right now, I mean, the president, he still does have his pathways. He's going to have to overturn somehow 20,000 votes in Pennsylvania. He has to overturn 40,000 in Arizona, 4,000 in Georgia, and he has to overturn, how much is it in Nevada right now? I think it's like 20,000 votes. Is it that much? Probably not, but it's still a little bit, especially for the president right now. So that's something else that you have to keep in mind right now for the president. It's going to be a little bit harder than you think. So yeah, so that is something that you have to take in mind. Now, I'm going to tell you something right now that I think really hurt the president. And I think the president would have been at a much better point. And if he didn't take that first debate to like talk over Biden. This has been a long time ago, but I think we felt that lasting impact. The polls would have been closer, which again, if you think about it, like the polls, they were wrong. But if they were closer, I mean, they were probably going to swing in Trump's favor. I mean, and 538, Nate Silver is like unreliable at this point because he's gotten 2 elections wrong at this point. Or he's expected the margins to go wrong. In some cases, he's gotten wrong the states and by how much they won by. So, I think that's something that we have to keep in mind because, at this point in time, it's something that for the pollsters, it's going to be something that this election is going to be very bad for them. They've massively gotten Ohio wrong. They've massively gotten Iowa wrong. They completely got Florida wrong. I think at this point, that's really going to hurt the pollsters as we move forward. And the days of trusting the polls for election insight are gone. And the polling industry is going to suffer a very big fall. And I mean, during this campaign, we saw Donald Trump and his supporters call the polls fake. And they ended up being correct. So take it how you want it, because I think that's what you're currently looking at with this presidential election. And I mean, it looks like at this point in time, very, 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 very bad for the president. And we were looking at a race that really just came down to the last couple of states. This was a nail-biting election. I was nervous when it came to like the morning after election night. I spent the day after of the election day, so November 4th, pretty much worried. Then I saw the election come to a standstill. I didn't worry that much because truly there wasn't that much to be worried about, but still. And something else I'm going to see. So I'm seeing right now a lot of discussion over the policies and taxing and all that. At this point in time, it's definitely a possibility that we see definitely an increase. I don't know how heavy or not, but definitely an increase in taxing in the United States under a Biden presidency. And Biden has already committed to do certain things during his campaign promises. And if you care about taxing, especially if it's probably going to affect everyone, there's studies that they have shown that. But the general idea is that, especially if you're like more of the affluent or more of the top 5 or 1%, like they like to call it, you're going to get taxed more under Biden. That's just something that's going to happen. Now, there is a discussion. There is a good or bad. And I want you guys to come to those conclusions because truly it could be both. It definitely could be both. And I think that is something that's definitely within the realm of possibility of being both. So I think, yeah, definitely at this point in time, that's something to definitely take a look at during this election. So yeah, most people who don't know why they hate Trump, that is true. And if there's been like interviews and things like that people have literally gone up to anti-Trump supporters, no, I think that's the wrong word. To people that just don't support the president, some of them just don't have reasons to. And I mean, if I'm going to dislike Biden or if I'm going to dislike Trump, I'm going to have a reason. I have to have a fair reason of why I dislike those candidates. And it has to be a good one because it can't just be some random excuse of because of why I don't like a certain candidate or not. You know what I mean? And it has to be to the point where you can like actually go through and back up what you're saying. It's not going to be just some random things that you're just saying. Um Kid, why do I think I have a voice? Because I do have one. Um I think at this point in time this election is changing a lot. Um and yeah, I mean, take a look at these races. I mean, they've just become insanely insanely tight. So, okay, let's see. Soapmore asks, I'm gonna answer Soapmore questions. So Purple, do you think that making gains among Latino voters generally, Trump got 50% of the vote in southern Texas border counties? In general, I think he definitely did get a lot of the some of the vote amongst Latinos. And here's the thing. So we have to understand the fact that the president was able to overperform with Latinos. He was able to overperform with those groups of people. And we saw that clearly. We saw that with voters in Miami. We saw that with voters in Texas. The reason Nevada is close right now, or closer than expected, because of Latino turnout for the president. President Trump generally increased the support amongst Latinos, and I think just that in general gives them like a little bit more of a better way to diversify. And for the Republican Party, it is definitely good. And in the future, we're going to start to see the Republican Party diversify. And if we're already seeing that, I mean, the Republican Party has already started to diversify. I mean, take a look. They have a lot more black candidates. They have a lot more black support amongst black males. The black females or African American women, they stayed a little bit more with the president, with Vice President Biden. However, we saw amongst those minorities Hispanic support for the president through the roof. So I think at this point in time, that is something that we have to keep in mind because that is going to affect the election. And I think that's something to keep in mind. Um, so yeah, let me see some questions in the chat. Rapists, murderers, as he called them. That is not true. I'm going to tell you this as a Hispanic who is an independent. I'm going to tell you this. I saw during that campaign, and I read, well, not during that campaign, but afterwards, and even actually during the campaign. It sounds insane, but I mean, what he was saying, it was taken out of context. You have to think about that, and a lot of these clips are cut and clipped. And usually, all politicians get this. Clips are cut and clipped. They said things that they actually did not say or were not intended, and the things were completely different. But I mean, especially when it came to that claim, I think that was taken out of context, definitely. Of course, you could say that like still like a tough comment. He was referring to the MS-13 gang. I don't know if you guys know that, but generally speaking, I think that's something that that's not talked about that much. So, go ahead, Roy. I mean, I don't really care. And I think at this point in time, that really has come to have an impact on this election. Now, I mean, another thing I want to talk about is, I mean, why are states like Minnesota going by bigger margins than like states like New Hampshire, for example? Like, or wait, no, I actually might have misspoken there. It's almost the same margin though. Wait. Yeah, it's the same margin in the state of New Hampshire than in Minnesota. Again, that sounds crazy considering some of the things we've seen in this election. But at this point in time, we're seeing a state like New Hampshire. Look, and generally speaking, this electoral map has been changed forever. I mean, we're not going to see no longer those races that's going to come down to the last couple of states. Right now, it's become you either lean Republican, lean GOP, pretty much no in between. A couple of states thrown here and there, but not that much. So from here on out, it's truly going to be who has the majority of support. And, Democrats have been winning in the popular vote for a very, very big amount of time. And to be honest with you, it's right now that we're seeing right now, the electoral college reflect that shift when it comes to those big gains in the popular vote. I mean, the electoral college, we're seeing states like Georgia narrow up a lot more. We're seeing states like South Carolina. We're seeing a lot of these states start to narrow up day in, day out. So I think that is something that is truly interesting. And the electoral map essentially will be transformed from here on out. And that is something that, again, must be happen. So that is something you have to think about right now. So I think that right now, for example, if this was up to the electoral to the popular vote, we would see pretty much the Democrats winning every election. Now, that's probably one of the things that's good. It gives the balance of power. However, I mean, just think about it in certain ways. How good is the electoral college? What do you guys think? So now I want to see what you guys think. So do you think the president has made inroads with groups of people like the Latinos and with minorities across the nation? Is that something that you guys think that has happened? Do you think that the president has been able to start leading with these groups of people? And I think he kind of has. And, that might be good for him in the long run, because at this point in time, he needs those voters. He needs those groups of people to be able to succeed in politics. And not only him, but the Republican Party. The Republican Party is relying on those voters right now. They really don't have that much of an option. I don't know about nationwide, but he's selling massively those. You're right. Maybe not nationwide, but he did have increases with Latinos nationwide in all places where Latinos, mostly with Cubans and Venezuelans. That would be kind of isolated to Miami. That's kind of the only region where we see that type of demographic. But in the southern border, we also have to understand that many Mexican voters or Latinos have Mexican ethnicity. Those voters, they're experiencing something that's a little bit more of like a socialist scare in Mexico right now. So a lot of those voters are coming in with that mentality. So again, you have to keep in mind those things. And understanding the political backgrounds of voters, especially immigrants, is very, very, very crucial. I mean, and I think it's something that needs to be understood, because if you can't understand that, it's going to be like a little tough to understand. Well, why are these immigrants? Because like in past elections, you've heard a lot that, oh, the Democrats are the party of immigrants, or those different types of things. So it really depends, but usually you have to take a look at that historical background, and that political background of those people, because those people, if they experience tough times in their countries, they're probably going to experience the tough times if they vote for the same thing. You know what I mean? And for some people, especially those Latino immigrants, they feel and they see the resemblance between the socialist governments and communist governments of those places. Maybe not to the same extreme, but the Republicans have been able to market it as the Democrats are the same as the governments in Cuba. They're the same as the governments in Venezuela. They're the same as the governments in Mexico or in Bolivia. Those things, and that really has hit hard with those Latino voters, and really dig into amount. So that is something that you just have to take into account. I think at this point in time, I'm looking at the chat right now. Let me read some stuff in the chat, because I think I haven't really seen the chat right now for a little bit. But yeah, a lot of people are just discussing President Trump. Some people have said that he has like stolen the election, or he tried to steal it, but some people want Trump to go do something. But here's the thing. At this point in time, it's something that President Trump is always going to be a figure that's always going to be very divisive. And in politics, guys, we just have to understand the fact and take the fact for what it is, that everything is divisive. Now, I mean, there are certain things that President Trump does or could do better. I mean, I think like one of the things that really cost Trump this election, for sure, was Twitter. If it wasn't for Twitter, I think we could be seeing a Trump victory right now. Again, that sounds crazy and everything, but at this point in time, that's a very big possibility. And that is something we definitely have to take into account. So yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna give General Tiso here. I mean, here's the thing. I believe in giving credit when credit is due, and I'm an independent. President Trump, and if it sounds like I'm talking a little bit too much in favor of Trump, it is because Donald Trump does not get as much credit as he deserves, right? So this comment is true. I mean, Obama was the one that started the child in cages. Now, could have Trump stop it, but of course. Now, me as a Latino, me as an independent Latino, you also have to understand other surrounding facts. It's bad that they keep child in cages, but for some of those kids, I mean, it's a lot better than the way they're deserving. Now, of course, don't take that as my endorsement of put the child in cages, or don't take that as an endorsement of President Trump. However, at this point in time, that could be like a possibility of some people how they think of it. So, yeah. If you tell me to accept an obvious voter fraud, call them Communist Party, not the Democrats. I don't think it's that obvious. There is some signs that there could be, but it could be. Blue wave, I wouldn't say that. I mean, Biden probably is going to win this election by around a margin of like over 270, like 300 electoral votes. So let's think about that. So that in and of itself is not a wave. The House, they lost seats. Blue wave, definitely. And in the Senate, they're not going to get the majority. Definitely a blue wave. This election has not been a blue wave. It has not been a red wave. If anything, it's been a very neutral election where the presidency goes to the Democrats, where we see the Republicans perform well in Congress. And I mean, at this point, that is what this election has become. That is what this election is. You know what I mean? And I think that's what we're looking at right now, with this election especially. 75 million to 7. Okay, here's another thing. The voter, it's a lot bigger, the number of voters compared to 2016. And then, I mean, at this point in time, Trump has already passed Hillary Clinton's total number of votes in 2016. This has been a high turnout election. It's a lot higher than 2016. I think at this point in time, there's been certain places have already called the race. So I'm gonna go to this this website that I use sometimes for political results. For those of you that watch my coverage of the Massachusetts primary for the Senate, you guys would know Decision Desk. I use this sometimes, but Decision Desk, which is a pretty, I mean, it's pretty notable. They've already called a lot of states. So I'm gonna switch my screen right now a little bit from that CNN map to quickly just go to the map for Decision Desk, which right now Decision Desk has officially called the race. So again, it depends on how you look at it, but it's something that has happened. So I'm going to show you guys this. So if you guys can see my screen, which I have to show right now, hold on. If you guys can see my screen right now, this is Decision Desk, and you would see right here, they've called a lot of races. They already put Biden at 273 as he carries Pennsylvania. They already called that for him. And they called a lot of races, and I think this just comes clearly to show that the possibilities of a victory for Biden right now are huge. With Decision Desk already called, I mean, you could essentially legitimately call Biden the president-elect. So, I mean, and I think just basing it off the data we have, the possibilities of the states flipping, I think it's something that you could call already. So the race has been officially called by at least a news source. Decision Desk election results, they have a lot of election results up. So that is something to definitely keep in mind. So that is what we're seeing with that. Now, I personally think that it gets better if we call the race, if we think about the race and take a look at the results with CNN, because CNN, they have a lot more experience than that startup website. Plus, I mean, one of the biggest things that we know from CNN is that they're very, very careful about calling these races. They had that scare in 2000 where they called a state and they had to completely retract it because they were wrong. And that essentially caused, CNN to just call these races with with caution. So for those of you asking, essentially Biden, you could already call him president elect. You could, but it's only been called by that one source, which it has election results and they make projections, but I would wait officially to call Biden president elect until he wins the CNN count. And I just think that's something we have to think about. You declare yourself the new president under diplomatic law because United States objectified Venezuela. Sure, let's just talk about that. Okay, I think we're looking at an election that the Republicans are just trying to come up with the voter fraud. Here's the thing with voter fraud. I'm going to tell you this right now. There is probably voter fraud in this election. Now, the question becomes, to what extremities? To what extremities? It could be something minor like what we've seen in past elections where there's only one or two cases, right? That is what we see with the possible voter fraud. It could range from that very small, little to no voter fraud to this huge amount of voter fraud that causes the election to change completely. So, considering those things, I think that the election could be raging. It could have no voter fraud to have, but it could be something like that. And voter fraud could really help or hurt both sides. So, again, really depending on how you look at the information, how you analyze it, that is very important. And it's also having proof. That is most likely not the biggest thing when it comes to like voter fraud and things like that. And that is something that just becomes very, 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 very crucial. And at this point in time, this race has changed a lot. So, you think North Carolina is done. So right now they have 98% reporting. Yep, 1.4%. I think it's in a similar vote than, what was the state that was 90? No, I think, North Carolina at this point, I don't know why they haven't called it. Alaska, they haven't kind of vote since election day. I don't know why they haven't made that projection yet. Who are we kidding? Alaska's going to go to the president. But I think that, I think at this point in time, they should be calling the state of North Carolina fairly soon because they have to. If he won the race in North Carolina, they're probably going to have to call it soon. Let's see if let's see some of the more questions that checked. Millennium Dork. Okay. I think at this point in time, we're looking at a race. And now we're seeing a glitch in Michigan, supposedly. So if you take a look at that, there was only in select counties, and they expect that the impact was like 5,000 votes. Nowhere near to have like the big impact that Trump needs on the election. Just keep out in mind. Trump supporters are just, you're going to hate and held accountable for your hate. Here's the thing, and I'm going to stand up for both sides here. So on one hand, when Republicans and conservatives take a look at the liberal and Biden supporters, they take a look at, they think socialists, they think all these bad things. They're not like that. And the same way that the liberals claim that Trump supporters and conservatives are these big, very racist, whatever. Those political stereotypes that are made on both sides are not true. I know it's politics, but no. I think at this point in time, that is something to understand. And, at this point in time, as a Hispanic, as a Latino in this country, I just think that, this election really was, for example, for minorities, one of the most diverse in a long time. And you saw, ways for the Republican Party with these voters, very good gain on when it came to those certain things. That is, generally speaking, what we're seeing with these races. And we saw that increase amongst Hispanic voters for the president, among African-American voters. And those increases with minorities among the GOP really helped out the president in many, many different ways. And I think that's something that's going to be interesting. Let's see. I don't know, Doug. Should I? You know, I'm gonna say something right now. I am a younger voice in politics, and an unbiased one at that. As a younger voice in politics, I feel that I know a lot about politics. I am very informed about the current happenings, and I think that I'm pretty sure that um, I'm more than capable and I'm very prepared to be running this. So for the people saying that I'm too young, for the people that say I don't know what I'm doing, I can assure you that I know what I'm doing, and I know about politics. I know what I'm talking about, and I am a truly unbiased voice. So for those people just saying that, just keep those things in mind. Trying to rig the election in your favor could be, you know, now it depends because like now you could say that both sides are trying to rig the election to their favor. The Democrats because they were trying to get voter fraud. If it did exist, it could fall both ways, or there isn't, or there's not, and then whoever is not is like lying because if there is voter fraud, then the Democrats would be lying, but then the Republicans would be lying if there isn't. So just just keep in mind. Just keep that in mind. Um, yeah. So you just have to think those things. I mean, these results as they start to come in, we're going to see like, a lot of those things. Unbiased, just another way. I'm not sure about that. Trump was time to destroy ISIS, and they did destroy ISIS. And I mean, I'm going to say this right now out loud that one of the things that I think Donald Trump did strongly during his presidency was his foreign policy. The U.S. foreign policy system was broken. Let's understand that. And under Obama, the system was broken. These dictatorships or like or like organizations that were money laundering and stuff, they were able to operate in the U.S. normally, like normal. It didn't matter. But with Trump, a lot of those restrictions have gotten stricter. Take a look at Venezuela. Anyone, the Venezuelan government cannot even touch U.S. soil. They can't. I mean, take a look at China. A lot of those operatives are now sanctioned. Take a look at all those different things. Foreign policy could be said that it's like a lot better under Trump than it was under Obama. Now, what are some of the things that Trump promised that really weren't that fixed? I think healthcare, he really didn't get anything done. Again, that was probably not one of his priorities. I think he just focused too much on the wall, which someone has solved the illegal immigration problem, although it's still a problem. Like illegal immigration has got down. And if you think like I mean illegal immigration, if you liked illegal immigration, well, you're probably against Trump since he made it go down. But that is something you have to think about. Well, President number 46, I think I do know what I'm talking about. Imagine Trump wins, then everybody's supporter would flip. That is true. And I think it's the same thing. If Biden wins, all the Trump supporters are going to flip out. It's just the natural state of the human mind. It's going to be the natural state of the human mind. And, I think at this point in time, it's something that you have to take into consideration that whoever loses is gonna end up having that sore loser type of feeling. And I mean, it happened in 2016. It's probably gonna happen during this election. And I mean, there's really no way to hide that. I mean, that is just a fact at this point in time. So yeah, that is definitely something we have to take into consideration. Let's see. Why are you listening to this child? I don't even know. I'm not a Trump supporter for this. I don't know, man. I mean, I think if you're just coming into the stream for the first time, you don't know me. There's a lot of viewers out there that have been watching my channel for a long time, and I invite you to go watch my older videos. I have a lot of older videos that have a lot of information about this election, and I invite all of you to go watch those videos and tell me what you think. So, you know what I mean? That is something that you guys should think about. So Brandon Cowell asks right now, what do I think of the Electoral College? I think the Electoral College is good in certain ways, but also brings a little bit of like unfair advantages. So it's good in the way that like it keeps the balance amongst the states. That I mean, essentially, like for example, smaller states, the smaller states really do have like somewhat of power. Their ideas don't get buried under the big states' wishes and whatever. Now, the bad thing is that it may not represent American democracy directly. And again, no country in the world right now is a direct democracy. There's very few of them. So, I think at this point in time, It just happens to be like something that has pros and cons. So yeah, I mean that is something that we have to keep in mind. Gerrymandering is horrible. I think we should be getting rid of gerrymandering. I mean, at a political standpoint, of course, you would want to like do anything to make sure you have a bigger chance of winning an election. However, I mean, it's not good for the country in many ways because again, it's just simply not good. I mean, and you're essentially disfranchising people's voices in many cases. So, yeah, gerrymandering is something that is wrong. It should be fixed. So, yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to be making like a lot of content, guys, like after this election, talking about what went wrong for each candidate, what things could have changed this election. And I mean, truly, this election has been one that has been long. This election has been one that has really, really changed a lot of how we view American election. The elections have become more of a political event where this is a theater, a big political theater. And I mean, everything just becomes more ridiculous. Every single election year, the things that these candidates have to do just to get votes, just to get attentions, has just gotten to the ridiculous point. So I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. Lobito's then boxing asks, can Trump still win? No, I think at this point in time, it looks very, very hard for Trump to win the election. I mean, there's probably still like a little bit of a chance. I would say like if I would give Trump a chance of winning at this point, it would be like 3 or 4%. Which I mean, to be president of the United States, not a horrible chance. I mean, I would love at least even a 1% chance of becoming U.S. president. So, I mean, it's not that likely right now. It's not the most likely scenario. However, at this point in time, it's looking like a little bit more of a Biden victory. And I mean, the decision desk, which I don't know if you were here when we looked at that map, they've already called the race for Biden. Now, it depends. I'm going to base it off of CNN, or at least until some of the major news sources call it, like Fox, MSNBC, the New York Times. Once that happens, I would consider the race officially called. But we're bracing in for impact of the of your presidential level. Your opinion is fine to me. Don't let people turn you off by the. Oh, thank you. I'm gonna be honest with you guys right now. Like, one thing that we've seen over the last couple of days is we've seen like the political polarity in the U.S. go up to his side. The red states are getting redder. The blue states are getting bluer. When are they going to call another state? Probably going to call another state tonight, and I think more likely than not, it's going to be North Carolina. That is what we're going to start to get called soon. So yeah, I mean, at this point in time, that's what we're seeing with this election, and it's starting to come down to the nitty gritty. It's starting to come down to the point where soon we're going to know for a fact who is going to be the next president, who is going to lead our country, and essentially who's going to be making these big decisions for our country that are going to have influential impacts forever. So yeah, I think over the last couple of hours, like Supreme Boy is saying, we've essentially seen a lot of some Trump supporters start coming to the realization. American elections, just like the Hunger Games distractions. I don't know what you mean by that specifically, but I think the biggest thing that we're seeing right now with this election is COVID-19 has taken forget about COVID-19. That doesn't exist anymore. It's taken a backseat, at least in the media. Because, I mean, COVID-19 is not being covered, but COVID-19 has had an increase of cases in the last couple of days. Public health crisis, you know what I mean? Tens of thousands of people screaming, "You love Trump." Those were whose candidate is losing. Maybe you should have put more flags on your trucks. Biden's about to flare up either way. That's probably true. And I mean, at this point in time, we were looking at a race where whoever won, the other side was going to be upset. The other side was more likely than not going to go out and protest. The other side was more likely than not going to go cross distractions across America. Some bad and some good. So, that's what I mean. Like, something that you have to take into consideration. COVID-19 was mishandled so bad. COVID-19 was mishandled so bad in the United States, and I think it's basically because of one reason. and it's the government's, like, because the different levels of government's ability to interact with each other. The federal government, the state governments, the local governments, or city governments, they contradicted each other in so many ways that there wasn't that one clear voice. And even when, for example, President Trump tried taking that voice, the governors wanted their power. Let's say the governors wanted to take the voice in their state, then the mayors wanted to take that power. It was this big political power grab that everyone wanted their power. So that is one of the reasons I think the um the COVID-19 was mishandled. That contradiction that we saw amongst the different levels of government. What side do you believe will have more violence? I think honestly, the if Trump won, there's going to be more violence. I mean, looking at like the recent Black Lives Matter protests, you know that like the more left leaning or the left wing radicals, because again, it's like if there was going to be unrest, most likely than not, it was going to be your left wing radicals and your right wing radicals. So I think that was a big thing. So um, yeah, but I think that's something we must see. Isn't COVID-19 mutating? It is a little bit. I mean, I'm not a scientist or anything, but the number of deaths and things like that, you would see that you would see definitely that there's less death and things like that. The side trying to threaten a civil war is mainly Republicans. That is true, but I think that generally speaking, if like violence, because again, this is also the situation that we're living in. Trump is the loser, so of course the Republicans are going to be the ones speaking. But let's suppose that we didn't know who was going to win. I don't know if it would be kind of me just basing off of recent events, but I would say the left, the radical left, would do it more likely than the radical right. However, based on the current situation, there is that plausibility for the radical right to be the ones that cause all the mayhem on America's streets. It's an absolute possibility at this point, and I mean it definitely does have a chance of happening, and it's not like it's impossible, but I mean it looks like at this point in time it's something that may be happening fairly soon, just considering how uncertain the results have come during this presidential election. So, guys, this is it for this live stream. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed talking with a lot of you guys through this chat. We had a very interesting and very productive live stream. We discussed the election, a lot of these different things. So, yeah, I mean, I hope you guys enjoyed this live stream. I know I did, and I'm going to be doing one of these tomorrow, analyzing the uncalled races, because by tomorrow we should be having more uncalled races, and keep on going and doing that. And yeah, thank you for all of you for coming, and thank you for all the comments about the videos and everything like that. So, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. If not, please remember to give it a big thumbs up, like, subscribe, and if please subscribe if you guys want more content. I'm putting out a lot of content really soon, so there's a lot of cool things coming up on the channel. Yeah. So guys, hope you enjoyed the video, and goodbye.